Life can take unexpected turns that leave us questioning everything we thought we knew. For Jack Winters, a self-made millionaire with more money than he knew what to do with, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. He was walking through Central Park, trying to clear his head after another long day of meetings and business calls, when he spotted a young boy sitting alone on a bench. What caught Jack's eye wasn't just the boy's tattered clothes, or the fact that he seemed to be crying. It was the piece of paper clutched tightly in his small hands. As Jack moved closer, his heart nearly stopped. The words on that paper were achingly familiar. They were the exact same words he had written to his son 15 years ago, right before his world fell apart. The letter had been Jack's final attempt to reconnect with his son after his ex-wife had taken the boy and disappeared without a trace. "To my dearest son," it began, "I know I haven't been the father you deserve." Jack had spent years and a fortune trying to find them, hiring private investigators and following countless dead ends. Eventually, he had poured himself into his work, building an empire to fill the void left by his missing child. But not a day went by that he didn't think about his son, wondering where he was, if he was happy, if he would ever see him again. And now, here was this boy, no more than 12 years old, reading his most private thoughts, his deepest regrets. If you've ever felt that moment when your past suddenly crashes into your present, you'll understand what Jack was experiencing. This story of unexpected connections and long-buried secrets might just change the way you think about the relationships in your own life. Before we continue with Jack's incredible journey, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that touch the heart. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed too coincidental to be random? Now let's get back to Jack and the mysterious boy in the park. Jack stood frozen, watching the boy from a distance, afraid to approach yet unable to walk away. The boy wiped his tears with a dirty sleeve, carefully folded the letter, and tucked it into a small wooden box. Jack noticed that despite his worn clothes, the boy had a certain dignity about him. Sitting up straight, his gaze thoughtful beyond his years. Where had he gotten that letter? Was it possible that after all this time, this boy knew something about his son? Jack's mind raced with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Yet something in his heart pulled him forward, one hesitant step at a time, until he was standing just a few feet from the bench. "That's a nice box you have there," Jack said softly, trying not to startle the child. The boy looked up, his eyes widening slightly at the well-dressed man before him. He clutched the box closer to his chest, protective. "My grandmother gave it to me," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It holds my most important things." Jack nodded, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. "May I sit?" The boy shrugged, sliding over slightly. Jack noticed a small birthmark on the boy's wrist as he moved, a crescent shape, just like the one his son had been born with. His heart began to pound so loudly he was certain the boy could hear it. From the corner of his eye, Jack studied the child's profile, the shape of his nose, the curve of his jaw. Could it be possible? After 15 years of searching, could fate have brought them together in this random encounter? He had to be careful, approach this gently. "I couldn't help noticing you were reading a letter," Jack ventured. "It seemed to mean a lot to you." The boy's fingers tightened around the box. "It's the only thing I have from my father," he said. "My mom told me he didn't want us, that he was too busy with his rich life to care about family. But this letter says different things." He paused, looking at Jack with sudden suspicion. "Why do you care anyway?" Jack's throat tightened. How could he explain that he might be that father? That the woman who had raised this boy had created a life of lies? "I guess I just know what it's like to lose someone important," he said carefully. "My son was taken from me when he was very young. I've been looking for him ever since." The boy's expression shifted, a flicker of interest crossing his face. Did you ever find him? Jack shook his head. Not yet, but I've never stopped hoping. He glanced at the wooden box. Would you mind telling me your name? The boy hesitated before answering. Michael, he said finally. Michael Turner. Not Winters, but Jack knew his ex-wife had likely changed their names. Michael seemed to be wrestling with something, glancing between Jack and the box in his hands. Finally, he made a decision, opening the lid to reveal its treasures: a smooth stone, a baseball card, a faded photograph, and the letter. My mom died last month, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. I've been staying with my grandmother, but she's not well either. Before Mom died, she gave me this box and told me the truth, that my dad didn't abandon us. She said she took me away because she was afraid. Jack fought to keep his expression neutral, though his heart was breaking. Afraid of what, Michael? She said my dad was becoming too powerful, too rich, and she was afraid I would become like him, Michael explained, tracing the edge of the box with his finger. She said money changes people, makes them forget what really matters. Jack nodded slowly, recognizing his ex-wife's fears. In those early years, he had been consumed with building his business, often working long hours and missing family dinners. Sometimes adults make decisions based on fear, he said carefully, but that doesn't mean they're right. Michael pulled out the letter, holding it with reverence. This doesn't sound like someone who doesn't care. He sounds sad, like he misses me. Jack fought back tears as he watched Michael handle the letter he had written all those years ago. Every word on that page had been torn from his soul during the darkest period of his life. The signature at the bottom, simply Dad, had been his final plea for his son to remember him, even if they never saw each other again. Now, seeing it in Michael's hands, Jack was overwhelmed by a mixture of hope and terror. What if Michael rejected him? What if the years of separation had created a gulf too wide to cross? May I ask where you got that letter? Jack finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse with emotion. My grandmother gave it to me after Mom died, Michael replied. She said Mom had kept it all these years, even though she never showed it to me. He looked up at Jack, his eyes searching. She said my father's name was Jack Winters. The name hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Jack couldn't speak, couldn't move. After all the years of searching, of hiring investigators and following false leads, his son had found him through a letter he'd never expected to be delivered. The universe had orchestrated what millions of dollars could not. But Michael wasn't finished. He reached into the box once more and pulled out something that made Jack's breath catch, a small silver music box. Grandma said this was from him too, Michael said, winding the tiny key. The familiar melody began to play, Brahms' Lullaby, the same tune Jack had played for his infant son every night before bed. It was the custom music box he had given to his wife on the day their son was born, with their initials engraved on the bottom, JW plus CW, and below that, MW, Michael Winters. Jack couldn't contain himself any longer. Michael, he whispered, may I see the bottom of that music box? Confused but curious, Michael turned it over. The initials were there, slightly tarnished but unmistakable. Jack gently took Michael's hand, turning it to reveal the crescent-shaped birthmark. I've been looking for you for 15 years, Jack said, his voice breaking. Your mother, she took you when you were just 3 years old. I've never stopped searching. Michael stared at him, emotions flickering across his face too quickly to read. Disbelief, wonder, fear, hope. You're saying you're my father? Jack Winters? Jack nodded, unable to speak through the lump in his throat. He reached for his wallet with trembling hands, pulling out a worn photograph, a younger version of himself holding a toddler with the same crescent birthmark, the same serious eyes. Michael took the photo, looking back and forth between the image and the man sitting beside him. The bench in Central Park had become a meeting point between past and present, a place where 15 years of separation might begin to heal. Jack wanted to embrace his son, to make up for every baseball game missed, every skinned knee unbandaged, every bedtime story untold. But he remained still, giving Michael the space to process this life-altering revelation. "I used to dream about meeting you," Michael admitted quietly. "Even when Mom said you didn't want us, I still imagined what you might be like." He looked up at Jack, his gaze direct and unflinching. "Are you really a millionaire?" Jack smiled sadly at the question. "Yes, but that's not what defines me. What defines me is being your father, even when I couldn't be with you." Michael considered this, his young face solemn. "Mom always said money was the root of all evil, that rich people don't care about others." Jack nodded, understanding his ex-wife's perspective. Money itself isn't good or bad. It's what people choose to do with it that matters. Some wealthy people do forget what's important, but others use their resources to help others, to make a difference. He hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of Michael's mother. "Your mom and I had different views on many things, but we both loved you more than anything in the world." Michael ran his fingers over the letter again, as if trying to connect the words on the page with the man sitting beside him. "The last few weeks at Grandma's have been hard," Michael confessed. "She can barely take care of herself, let alone me. The social worker came yesterday, talking about foster care." He looked down at his worn sneakers. "I was sitting here trying to figure out what to do next." Jack's heart constricted at the thought of his son entering the foster system when he had a father with the means to provide everything he could ever need. But he knew he couldn't simply sweep in and claim Michael. Trust would need to be built, relationships mended. "Michael, I know I'm a stranger to you right now," he said carefully, "but I would like the chance to be in your life, to help you and your grandmother if you'll let me." The boy's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and wariness. "You would help Grandma too? She's all I have left." Jack nodded firmly. "Of course. She kept that letter and music box all these years, made sure you knew the truth when the time was right. I owe her a great deal for that." He paused, not wanting to overwhelm Michael with promises and plans. "We can take things as slowly as you need, but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore." Michael's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if a heavy burden had been partially lifted. "How do I know you won't disappear again?" he asked, the question piercing Jack's heart with its raw honesty. "I never disappeared, Michael. I never stopped looking for you," Jack said gently. "But I understand your caution. Actions speak louder than words, and I have 15 years of fatherhood to prove to you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Michael. "This has all my contact information. You can call me anytime, day or night." Michael took the card, studying it carefully before placing it in his box alongside the letter. The simple act felt monumental to Jack, his son, accepting a small piece of him into the collection of his most treasured possessions. It was a beginning, fragile, but real. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across Central Park, Jack and Michael continued to talk, bridging the years of separation with careful questions and hesitant answers. Jack learned that Michael loved science and baseball, that he struggled with math but excelled at writing stories. Michael discovered that his father had built his fortune in technology, that he lived alone in a penthouse apartment overlooking the park, that he donated to children's charities in hopes of helping kids like the son he had lost. Neither mentioned the future directly, both sensing that such discussions would come later, when the shock of their reunion had settled into something more stable, more familiar. Eventually, Michael checked his watch and said he needed to get back to his grandmother's apartment before dark. Jack offered to walk him home, and to his relief, Michael accepted. As they stood to leave, Michael carefully packed away his treasures, securing the box under his arm. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they began walking. Jack nodded, ready for anything. The letter says you made mistakes, that you weren't the father I deserved. What did you mean? Jack took a deep breath, knowing this question required complete honesty. When you were little, I was building my company. I worked long hours, missed dinners, was distracted even when I was home. Your mother worried I was teaching you that work was more important than family. Is that why she left? Michael asked, his voice small but steady. Jack nodded slowly. Partly. We had other problems too. We were both young, stubborn. But instead of working through our issues together, she made a choice that affected all of us. He glanced down at Michael, not wanting to tarnish his memory of his mother. I understand better now why she felt she had to leave. But taking you away completely, letting you believe I didn't want you, that was wrong. They walked in silence for a moment, processing the weight of the past. I built my company into something successful, Jack continued. But the cost was losing what mattered most. That's the mistake I've regretted every day since. As they approached, a modest apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, Michael slowed his steps. This is where Grandma lives, he said, gesturing to the weathered structure. Jack noted the peeling paint, the security gate with a broken lock, the general air of neglect. His son had been living here while he occupied a luxury penthouse just miles away. The contrast was jarring, painful. Michael, he said carefully, would you feel comfortable if I came up to meet your grandmother? I understand if it's too soon. Michael considered this, chewing his lip thoughtfully. I think she'd want to meet you, he decided finally. She always said Mom was wrong to keep us away. They climbed 4 flights of stairs to a small apartment at the end of a dimly lit hallway. Michael used his key to open the door, calling out, "Grandma, I'm home." An elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, her face lined with years of hardship, but her eyes bright and alert. She froze when she saw Jack, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "Jack Winters." Jack stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of his welcome. "Hello, Catherine," he said softly, recognizing his former mother-in-law despite the passage of years. "Michael and I met in the park today." Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she looked between them. "It's really him, Grandma," Michael confirmed, holding up his wooden box. He recognized the letter and the music box. "And look, he has the same picture we have." Catherine moved forward slowly, as if approaching a mirage that might disappear. "I always told Claire she was wrong to keep you two apart," she said, her voice wavering. "A boy needs his father." She reached out and took Jack's hand between her weathered ones. "I'm so sorry for what my daughter did. She was afraid of losing herself, afraid of living in your shadow. But she realized her mistake toward the end." Jack was stunned by this unexpected welcome, this absolution he had never dared to hope for. "She made me promise to give Michael the letter and music box," Catherine continued, leading them into the small living room. "She said if anything happened to her, I should try to find you." She sank into an armchair, her energy seemingly depleted by the emotional moment. Jack noticed the oxygen tank beside her chair, the prescription bottles lined up on the side table. Michael hadn't exaggerated about his grandmother's health. "I've been trying to figure out how to contact you," Catherine admitted, "but then Michael found you instead. Or you found him. Some things are meant to be, I suppose." Jack glanced at his son, who was watching this exchange with wide, attentive eyes. The tiny apartment told the story of struggle, mismatched furniture, worn carpet, walls in need of fresh paint. But it also spoke of love. Photographs of Michael at various ages carefully displayed, schoolwork proudly pinned to the refrigerator, a shelf of well-read books. Catherine had done her best for her grandson, with limited resources. Jack felt a surge of gratitude toward this woman who had preserved his memory for his son, who had kept the connection alive when it would have been easier to let it die. "Catherine," he said, taking a seat on the sofa, "I want to help, both of you. Whatever you need, medical care, a better place to live, Michael's education, all of it." Catherine studied him, as if looking for the young man she had known 15 years ago. "You've done well for yourself," she observed. "Claire always said you would." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a weary acceptance of how life had unfolded. "I don't have much time left, Jack. The doctors have been clear about that. My biggest worry has been what would happen to Michael." She glanced at her grandson with such love that Jack's heart ached. "The social worker says he'll go into foster care when I'm gone, unless—" She left the thought unfinished, but Jack understood. Unless his father stepped forward to claim him, unless the letter found its way home. The weight of responsibility settled on Jack's shoulders, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. This was what he had wanted for 15 years, the chance to be a father to his son again. But he knew it wouldn't be simple. Michael would need time to adjust, to learn to trust him. And there were legal hurdles to overcome, proving paternity, establishing guardianship, addressing the years of absence. Yet looking at Michael, seeing his own eyes looking back at him, Jack knew with absolute certainty that he would move heaven and earth to make this work. "We'll figure it out together," he promised, including both Michael and Catherine in his gaze. Over cups of tea at Catherine's small kitchen table, they began to sketch the outline of a future none of them had dared to imagine just hours before. Jack would contact his lawyers in the morning to start the process of legally establishing himself as Michael's father. Catherine would continue living in her apartment with improved home health care, paid for by Jack. Michael would finish the school year where he was, giving him time to adjust to the idea of eventually moving in with his father. "We'll take it one day at a time," Jack assured them both, sensing Michael's mixture of excitement and apprehension. "No pressure, no rushing. We have time to get to know each other again." As the evening grew late, Jack reluctantly prepared to leave, promising to return the next day. At the door, Michael surprised him by initiating a quick, awkward hug. "See you tomorrow, Dad?" The word was tentative, a question rather than a statement, but it was the most beautiful sound Jack had ever heard. "Definitely, son," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." As Jack walked back through the darkening streets toward his empty penthouse, he felt lighter than he had in 15 years. The letter he had written in despair had somehow found its way to his son, creating a bridge across time and distance that even his millions couldn't buy. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, doctor appointments, and precious hours spent rebuilding the bond between father and son. Jack's lawyer confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. The DNA test proved Michael was indeed his child. The judge was sympathetic to their unusual situation, granting Jack full legal custody while allowing Catherine to remain an important presence in Michael's life. Jack arranged for top specialists to manage Catherine's care, giving her the best quality of life possible in the time she had left. And most importantly, he and Michael began the delicate dance of becoming family again, learning each other's habits, preferences, and rhythms. Jack had imagined this reunion countless times over the years, but reality proved both more challenging and more rewarding than his fantasies. Michael tested boundaries, asked difficult questions, and sometimes withdrew into silence when emotions became too intense. There were awkward dinners, tearful confessions, and occasionally arguments that left both of them frustrated and uncertain. But there were also breakthrough moments of connection, teaching Michael to drive in an empty parking lot, cheering together at a baseball game, late-night conversations about dreams and fears that stretched until dawn. Slowly, the word "Dad" became natural on Michael's lips. No longer a question, but a comfortable truth. On a warm Sunday afternoon 6 months after their chance meeting in the park, Jack and Michael helped Catherine move into a bright, accessible apartment in a building with medical staff on site. It was just 3 blocks from Jack's penthouse, close enough for daily visits but separate enough to maintain her independence. As they arranged her beloved photographs on the wall, Catherine pulled Jack aside. "You've given Michael what Claire—" "And I couldn't," she said softly. "Stability, security, a future without limits." Jack shook his head, humbled by her words. "He's given me far more," he replied. "Purpose, joy, a reason to come home at night. Everything I've built means nothing compared to having him back in my life." Catherine smiled knowingly. "That letter you wrote, I kept it all these years because it showed the truth of your heart. When Claire was dying, she read it again and cried for hours. I was wrong, she told me. So wrong to keep them apart." Jack felt a complicated surge of emotions. Grief for what might have been, forgiveness for his ex-wife's misguided decision, gratitude for Catherine's wisdom in preserving that fragile paper connection. Across the room, Michael was carefully placing his wooden box on the nightstand beside his grandmother's bed. The treasures inside, the letter, the music box, the photograph, had expanded to include new memories. Tickets from his first baseball game, with Jack a key to the penthouse, a Father's Day card signed simply, "Your son, Michael." Life rarely gives us second chances as perfect as the one Jack and Michael received that day in Central Park. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't the ones we can buy with millions, but the connections we forge with the people we love. A simple letter, written from the heart and preserved against all odds, became the bridge that spanned 15 years of separation. For Jack, success had brought him wealth beyond imagination, but it was only when he found his son that he truly felt rich. And for Michael, discovering his father meant finding not just financial security, but the missing piece of his own identity, the answer to questions he had carried his whole life. Has this story touched your heart? Perhaps it's made you think about connections in your own life that need mending, bridges that need building. The truth is, we all have relationships worth fighting for, worth preserving, even when time and distance seem insurmountable. Maybe there's a letter you need to write, a call you need to make, a hand you need to extend. Don't wait for chance to bring that person back into your life. Be brave enough to make the first move. Remember that sometimes the greatest wealth isn't found in bank accounts or business empires, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to open your heart to the possibility of reunion. What would your letter say if you were writing to someone you've lost touch with? What truths would you share? What regrets would you express? In our digital age, we've forgotten the power of words carefully chosen and committed to paper, the way a handwritten note can preserve emotions across years and miles. Jack's letter survived 15 years, carried his love to a son who had been told his father didn't want him, and ultimately brought them back together in a moment neither could have predicted. There's magic in that kind of communication. Authentic, vulnerable, honest. Perhaps it's time to rediscover the art of meaningful connection in our own lives. The wooden box that held Michael's treasures represents something we all need, a safe place for the pieces of our history that define us, that remind us who we are and where we came from. What would you put in your own treasure box? What objects tell the story of your journey, your relationships, your hopes and dreams? For Michael, that box contained his past, present, and future. The letter connecting him to his father, the music box playing the lullaby of his infancy, the photograph, proving he had been loved from the beginning. These weren't expensive items, but they were priceless in their significance, in their ability to maintain a connection that might otherwise have been lost forever. As Jack and Michael continue building their relationship, they face the challenges all families do, disagreements, misunderstandings, the clash of different personalities and perspectives. But they approach these obstacles with gratitude rather than frustration, aware of how close they came to never knowing each other at all. Each difficulty becomes an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to learn more about each other, to grow together as father and son. Jack's wealth provides opportunities and comfort, but both he and Michael understand that their true fortune lies in having found each other against impossible odds. Their story reminds us that sometimes life's most meaningful connections are formed not in spite of our struggles, but because of them. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed too perfect to be coincidence? A chance encounter that changed everything? A seemingly random event that altered the course of your life? Jack and Michael's meeting in Central Park might seem like fiction, but similar reunions happen every day around the world. Long-lost siblings finding each other through DNA testing, adopted children connecting with birth parents, old friends reuniting after decades apart. These moments remind us that the human heart has an extraordinary capacity for connection, for recognition, for love that transcends time and distance. They give us hope that the relationships that matter most to us are never truly lost, just waiting to be rediscovered. Think about the moments in your own life when something small, a letter, a photograph, a chance meeting, led to something profound. How different might your journey have been if that tiny catalyst hadn't occurred? For Jack and Michael, it was a letter preserved for 15 years and a boy sitting on a park bench at precisely the right moment. Their story invites us to pay attention to the seemingly insignificant details of our daily lives, to recognize the potential for transformation in ordinary moments. It challenges us to remain open to possibility, to connection, to the unexpected ways our lives might intersect with others, because sometimes the most extraordinary chapters of our story begin with the simplest of encounters. The power of forgiveness runs deep through Jack and Michael's reunion. Catherine had to forgive her daughter for the choices that separated father and son. Jack had to forgive his ex-wife for taking his child. Michael had to forgive the adults who had shaped his early life through their decisions, both wise and flawed. Without this mutual grace, their new relationship could not have flourished. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harm, but rather choosing to move forward unburdened by resentment. It's a gift we give ourselves as much as others, the freedom to build something new from the rubble of what was broken. What relationships in your life might be transformed through the healing power of forgiveness? As we reflect on this remarkable story of reunion and second chances, let's consider what treasures we might be overlooking in our own lives. Are there relationships we've allowed to fade that deserve renewal? Letters we've left unwritten, words of love or apology unspoken? Jack spent 15 years and millions of dollars searching for his son, only to find him through a preserved letter and a chance encounter. Sometimes the connections we seek most desperately are closer than we realize, waiting for us to open our eyes, to extend our hands, to speak from our hearts. The greatest wealth in life comes not from what we accumulate, but from whom we love and who loves us in return. Jack and Michael's story doesn't end with their reunion. It begins anew, with challenges and joys neither could have anticipated. Life rarely gives us perfect endings, but rather continuous opportunities to write the next chapter with greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and renewed purpose. Their future together will include difficult conversations about the past, adjustments, as they learn to be family again, moments of doubt followed by stronger certainty. But they face this journey with the precious knowledge that they were meant to find each other, that their connection transcended years of separation and misunderstanding. What new chapter are you ready to begin in your own story? What connection are you prepared to fight for, to nurture, to celebrate,